This is Lightning Power Lunch on the Lightning Audio Network with Dave Mishkin and Greg Linnelli.
That was more of a structured game. I don't think there was, there was chances both ways, but for the most part, I think we did a better job of trying to play how we want to play. I think this road trip was a good step for us, but overtime, we lose the face-off and we never get the puck back, and they put it in.
Those darn face-offs, my goodness. You know, overtime, it's a little like the shootout from this perspective that there's a lot of things you can't control. And whoever wins the face-off in overtime oftentimes is going to have I don't know what the percentage is, who wins the initial face-off and controls possession, but if you don't, your chances of really controlling or dictating play go down significantly. And I don't want to say it's a little different than your typical 3 periods of play where you can go back and forth. It is kind of a different game within the game, overtime, kind of like the shootout. It's just a different element. And we talked about face-offs, and we'll get into that here on Power Lunch on Lightning Radio. We are taping the show. Mish is on the other side, and we'll take your questions at Bolts Radio. But, partner, the Lightning were better in the face-off circle yesterday, percentage-wise, for sure. But maybe what's the old saying in any sport? It's when you do something, not how many, oftentimes. And last night, at least in the overtime, that's what people were going to focus on initially. There's some other things you and I are going to get into in this game. But that was disappointing because the Lightning feel like 3-on-3, they've got some guys who can be game breakers. But if you don't win that face-off, it does make things difficult to regain possession and push back.
It can make things difficult.
Yes.
I mean, I don't know how often the team that wins the faceoff to start overtime has possession the whole rest of the way until they score the winning goal. I don't know that it happens that often, but I do recall 2 years ago, I think it was 2 years ago, at the start of the 23-24 season, the Lightning had a bunch of overtime games where they lost the faceoff, and exactly what we saw last night happened to them. I think they lost a game to Toronto where Toronto had possession the whole way. Buffalo, maybe early in the year, Buffalo had possession the whole way. And so where you can get into trouble if the team with possession of the puck actually manages it well. First of all, it's hard work defending without the puck in a 3-on-3.
Heck yeah.
I mean, you're digging because you got to cover more ground. A. B, it's like the second period. Your bench is across the red line from your defensive zone, and the team with the puck is not going to really let you safely get off the ice. So what can happen and what did happen last night was the Capitals maintained possession. They hit the post. I think it was Protas. Protas hit the post, but they maintained possession, and they got 3 fresh guys over the boards, and the Lightning were only able to change the guy up top. Basically, point changed for Cirelli. Kucherov and McDonough were out there the entire, when I say the entire overtime, Cirelli started overtime. When the Lightning lost the draw, Cirelli went to the bench and Kucherov jumped on. So essentially, Kucherov's shift started like 2 seconds into overtime. What was the winning goal? 1:19 into overtime.
Right.
So McDonough and Kucherov had a shift of over a minute. Hard work on that shift. Now, fans will point out, well, it was Cirelli who lost track of Chychrun at the back post. That is true. But the Lightning got into trouble because they didn't win the faceoff, and credit the Capitals for executing well.
Right.
To kind of like, it's like one of those like 90-yard drives in football, right? Where you're working the clock and you're wearing down the defense. And that's kind of what we see happen sometimes in overtime. But I think there are a lot of overtimes where the team that wins the opening faceoff doesn't win the game right away, and both teams end up having possession. But that just didn't happen last night. I'll say this, Greg. This was, I think, the Lightning's best game of the year. And I say that based on how they played, the quality of the opposition, and what they got out of it. They got a point on the road in a building that has not been friendly to them through the years. So let's just get that out of the way. Were there irritating points in that game for the fans who were paying attention? Did they make some mistakes that proved to be costly? Yes, all of that is true. But if we were comparing how they played in Game 4, certainly to how they played in the first two games, and even to an extent Game 3, the game they won in Boston, this was head and shoulders better. You know what? It needed to be better.
Yeah.
Because what we talked about yesterday, we spent a lot of time yesterday talking about the Boston game, but we touched a little bit on the Capitals. Capitals are as advertised. They entered the game with great defensive numbers, great 5-on-5 numbers. And everything I saw last night backs that up. They are a really, really good defensive team. They don't give up a lot. When they give up something, they have excellent goaltending. Both their goalies are excellent. Logan Thompson and Charlie Lindgren.
Yeah.
They had a shutout win at MSG where, I mean, I guess they gave them more chances than they normally do. Lindgren kind of stole it for them. He had 35 saves. Last night was a low-chance game. It wasn't a no-chance game, though. And the chances that the teams got, both of them, seemed to come, interestingly, off the rush with some odd mans. But the bulk of the game, first of all, the bulk of the game was played 5-on-5. There were only 5 power plays total in the game. The Caps had 3, the Lightning had 2. And really, like, in zone, both teams defended well. The Lightning were committed to contesting pucks. They were very hard in front of their own net. They helped out Vasilevsky. He also helped them out because he did make saves on some scoring chances. But I think if we were to, like, try and predict how would this game go before the game was played, we would say, all right, we can see from the numbers that the Capitals are an excellent defensive team. So the Lightning may only have limited scoring chances. Hopefully they can bury some of them.
Right.
But if they're going to have a chance of getting points out of this game, they need to basically match what the Capitals are doing defensively. And they did that. Yeah. It wasn't a perfect game. They had mistakes on the 3 goals they allowed, but they pick up 3 out of 4 points to start this 4-game road trip. As you can see from my background, I'm back home. The Lightning flew home after the game yesterday. They're going to leave again for the second part of this road trip tomorrow for Detroit. But this is a good start to the road trip. I mean, there's no other way to kind of frame this. And the way the Lightning got the point last night is the way they're going to need to play. Just like when I said after opening night, when they were not good defensively against Ottawa, that is not the way the Lightning want to play. Regardless of scoring 3 goals, up 3-1, all of that. Like, they needed to be better defensively than they showed in the Ottawa game. That's the way they need to play. What we saw last night, and they just happened to take on a really high-level defensive opponent. I got to say, the left side of the Washington defense, Karlsson had a great game. Karlsson had his fingerprints on the 2 Washington goals that were scored in regulation.
Well, the Hedman clear
with
great
plays.
Yeah,
that was a
play.
Huge mistake, but great play by Karlsson.
Great play.
And on the Protas goal, the Lightning had a guy open in the low slot, and the Lightning tried to get that guy the puck, and Karlsson blocked it. He prevented the pass from getting through, and then Wilson threw it down the ice, and the Lightning had a mix-up on coverage, and that's how Protas tied the game at 1. Karlsson's on the right side. He's at the end of a long contract. He's 35 years old. Clearly, he can still play at a high level. There was an interesting article about, like, I want to keep playing. I want to keep playing in Washington. Washington's kind of taking the Julian approach with McDonough, right? Kind of like, let's see where we are at the end of the year. But Karlsson wants to be on the Olympic team for the U.S. Anyway, he's on the right side. The left side of the Washington D core, you got Farivari, who is I think, underrated, but excellent defensive defenseman. He is Karlsson's partner. You got Chikrin, who is a terrific all-around defenseman and had the winner last night. Had a chance to win the game late in regulation. That was one of Vasilevsky's best saves. And then you got Rasmus Sandin.
Yeah.
He's a terrific defenseman. The Lightning, the Maple Leafs traded him at the deadline in 2023 to get a more experienced defenseman, Eric Gustafsson. The Capitals were like, thank you very much.
Yeah.
We'll take this young defenseman. Those 3 lefty Ds are outstanding. And, I mean, their whole D-core is good, and their whole team defends well. So, if they're going to play like that, like, they are going to be a playoff team.
They're going to give
I don't know if they're
themselves a
going to have the
chance.
year they had last year. I don't
Right.
know if Protas is going to score 30 goals, although he's got 3. I don't know if McMichael is going to have 26. Wilson had 30-plus goals last year. Ovechkin had 44, like we talked about. Strome had over whatever it was. I think he had almost 20 goals. He led their team in points. I don't know if they're going to produce as much offensively, and they haven't to this point this year, but it's the same thing we talk about all the time, Greg. If you defend,
Yes.
you can get points.
Yes.
And this seems to be not the
Correct.
exception. This is the rule for Washington. This is how they play as a team.
There's a certain amount of games you're going to win just in the regular season if you defend hard.
Yeah.
And they do. You mentioned Carlson. Wilson, I think, had the same impact.
Yeah, he did. He had a great game.
He was phenomenal. He seems
With
like
a
he
big
gets better
check
with
on
age.
Moser.
Oh, just Moser's credit. He got right back up.
Oh, yeah.
And by the way, has Moser been the Lightning's most consistent performer overall
Well, in 2
to
games.
start the season?
Yeah, 'cause
well,
he
yeah. I mean,
missed-
for 2 games, he's been really good. And he's been chippy. Have you noticed that? I feel like he's been more engaged physically.
He has.
And that has stood out.
And if you look at the time on ice, who has been the Lightning's TOI leader in the last 2 games? J.J. Moser.
Yeah.
Now, some of that was due to the fact that they lost Crozier in the first period. I did see a replay of it. At first, it looked like he took a hit from Sordiff. That's not what happened. His skate hit a rut in the ice, and his ankle got twisted. So
let's hope he's.
that's not a great injury. I mean, Coop basically said he's definitely not playing Friday. So it could be a sprain. I don't know if it's a high ankle sprain. High ankle sprains, though, take a long time to heal. Sure. Hopefully it's not that. We'll see. He tried to game it out. I saw him do a twirl at the TV timeout after he got hurt.
Just couldn't do it.
And I thought maybe he had a shift or two after that play, but he didn't play for sure in the second or third periods or overtime. So it was a 5D sort of game for the Lightning for the bulk of it. And Moser was used in all situations other than the power play.
You know, with all of that being said, playing the majority of the game with 5 defensemen on the road.
Second half of a back-to-back.
I think you'll take a point. I mean,
yeah.
Look, it's the things we have talked about before when the Lightning had been leading earlier in the first couple of games where they didn't come away with anything to get something against a good Washington team. That is beneficial. Before we get to more topics, I want to make sure From partner gets their proper due. Smooth, versatile, now pouring at Benchmark International Arena. Order a Tropical Wave or a Lightning Mule and taste why fans are switching. Rum is a premium craft Florida local rum built on authenticity, quality, and easy drinkability. Ask for Rum by name. Go Bolts and enjoy responsibly. People are always going to highlight the errors in a game like that because I think when you have a team that does the things Washington does defensively, typically they're not going to make a lot of mistakes on their own. So when one does happen, everybody focuses on it, and we did see that with Victor Hedman, the goal that tied things up. Was that a great play, or was it a bad read by Hedman? And maybe it's a combination of both. But it does seem like, and it's not just Hetty, because I think we saw it last night, and I think we've seen it through 4 games too. They've put themselves in some tough spots with passes that they shouldn't be making. And we know some of the players that are making these passes are used to, there's a risk reward associated with it because they are high-end players that are making plays, and part of that is you're going to have a certain amount of errors also that come with it. It does feel like those are sticking out more, and maybe it's the start of the year, than if this was happening mid-year. I don't know where you come down on it. Is this just the ebbs and flows of a Lightning season? You take the good and the bad, knowing that some players are gonna have those mistakes, and you just live with it because you also know they're gonna make 10 great plays along the way. Or is this something that, you know, we feel like, all right, through 4 games, it's been a little bit more of a trend than we'd like to see, and it definitely needs to cut down moving forward.
So hindsight is always 20/20.
That is true.
And in the moment, sometimes you make the wrong decision, frankly. Yeah. I mean, hockey is a very fast-moving game. It's not like the Capitals made every decision yesterday that was the correct one. I mean, teams make mistakes. But I think a general rule that I try and go back to when I'm thinking about this sort of stuff is what John Cooper preached after the Lightning lost to Columbus in 4 straight in 2019, came back the next year. One of the things that he had to hammer home, he felt he had to hammer this home, and we heard him talk about this because they had cameras in the locker room in the bubble. We have to take some of the risk out of our game.
Right.
Do not sacrifice defense for offense. Now, look, Hedman gets that puck. He's probably, I don't know, between 5 and 10 feet from the blue line, and Gensel is in the clear. If that pass gets through, Jake Gensel has a shorthanded breakaway from his own blue line all the way down the ice. That is an opportunity that Hedman didn't want to pass up. On the other hand, you're on the road. It's the third period. You've got your second lead of the game. You're up 2-1. You're in the process of killing this penalty, and I think into the second half of the kill for sure. 3:35. Yeah, they were over a minute into the kill. That puck goes down the ice. You're gonna make it harder on the Capitals to score. Not to say they can't score, but you're forcing them to go the 200 feet, re-enter the zone cleanly, set it up. Instead, puck stays in the zone. Seconds later, it's in your net. So, again, hindsight is 20/20, but time score situation, you know, if Heddy had to do it over again, that puck just needs to go down the ice because he could have easily done that. Like,
sure.
Had he not tried to make that pass, he had plenty of room to, you know, bank it off the boards, just get it down there. Now, if you're down 2-1, it's in the third period, and you're like, we have a chance to maybe get a shorthanded breakaway. That's a different situation, right? Also, be aware of who is out there. John Carlson has always been so good with his stick. And we saw him make the 2 plays last night with his stick. With his stick, I'm talking about using it to intercept pucks and not just like stop pucks, right. Control pucks. He is very, very good at keeping pucks in at the offensive blue line when the Caps have been on the power play or even 5-on-5. Like, it's hard to rim a puck around the boards on his side, especially if he's on his forehand, and get it past him. So that's just the strength of his. And he made so you said, is it a great play by the other team? Is it a poor play by the Lightning? It was a little bit of both, right? Like, Hedman could have made a different decision, but also, if it isn't John Carlson, maybe that pass gets through, right?
I think that's fair. It's just interesting. It was, 2 veteran players who had their fingerprints on that specific goal. Mm-hmm. 2 Hall of Famers, almost. I mean, you can make the case.
Yeah.
And I think that's probably the beauty of sports is sometimes that happens. Your best players, they try to make a play, and the other team has another best player who counters. I think that's, fascinating. So it's just something that was highlighted.
Sorry, go ahead.
No, it was something that was highlighted after the game. I saw a lot of people,
tweeting
that out.
That was a big play. I mean,
it was.
You're up. If you're the Lightning, you're up 2-1 in the third period. You regain the lead early in the third, late on a power play. I mean, you talk about killer goals. 4 seconds left in the Lightning's power play, and they score to go up 2-1. They're in a position to hold on to the lead, maybe. I mean, the Caps tied it with 15 minutes left. So, I mean, there was a lot of hockey still.
There was a lot of time left.
I want to mention 2 things, and we can get to questions. Vasilevsky had an oopsie on the first Washington goal. He turned the wrong way, so it was an open net for Protas. He had no chance on goals 2 or 3. This was his. I think he's been good so far, actually. Like, based on the number of scoring chances he's allowed, maybe a goal or 2 in each of the first 2 games are not, quote-unquote, Vasi-like. He was outstanding yesterday. So he didn't see as much activity as he had maybe in the earlier 2 starts, but he made some really important saves because there were some odd man rush chances for Washington, and then there was that opportunity for Chychrun late in the third. If Vasilevsky doesn't stop that, the Lightning might be looking at a regulation loss. So I thought he had a very encouraging game for the fans who were like, Vasi missed so much of training camp, and I thought he looked like his usual self yesterday. And the other thing I'm going to mention, and this is something we harped on in the Ottawa game, You're tied in the third period. They were tied entering the third period. They got the lead, but they gave it back, and there were still 15 minutes on the clock. That's a long time.
Mm-hmm.
I thought they managed those final 15 minutes well. Were they perfect? No. They gave it the chance to Chikrin. I just mentioned that. But they did what they needed to do to get a point out of the game. And I thought that that was very important. Just as I said, it was damaging that they weren't able to do that in the game against the Senators. We got closer and closer to the end of regulation, and the Lightning played the way that they needed to play. And they got, a timely save or two from Vasilevsky along the way. But again, like, how do you have success in the regular season? You defend. Lightning did that. You pick up points in back-to-backs. They got 3 out of 4 points. Both games on the road. They were facing a rested opponent. They had to do it down to 5D for the bulk of the game. And when you are tied in the third period, no matter what happens after the third period, you absolutely have to get that game to overtime. If you don't win it yourself in regulation, you cannot swallow regulation losses when you are tied in the third period. It's going to happen. I understand that, particularly as you get later in regulation. And Lightning ensured that they took a point out of that game, which was very, very important based on the circumstances that, it's 2-2 with 15 minutes left. That could have gone any which way. But the Lightning made sure that they kind of took care of business and got the final 15 minutes played with no more goals against. And so they took their point.
Yeah. I think more positives to build off of than negatives. I think if you're John Cooper's team, and look, in a long season partner, I think you have to take that approach. And they were better in this game than they have been, to your point, maybe all year. And I know it's a short series.
Sure.
Defensively.
Yeah.
Yeah. Are there guys that still need to get going? No doubt about it. But you anticipate, because of the track record that those players have, they will figure that out. Let's see how it transpires, but I think getting a point is very positive. Boomer had a question. This was for today's show. We got it in yesterday late. Guys, what do you see different from the PK this year as compared to last? I remember Dave calling the Bolts out early in last year's season, saying the PK needs to be up closer to 90%. Not sure how bad it was, but curious if you see a difference from this year to last. Great start so far.
So they did finish 6th in penalty killing last year, so they finished well.
I was going to say they did
may
pretty
have
well.
had some. They may have had some leaky games early in the year. If you have leaky games early in the year, your percentage is really going to struggle. Look at Washington. Washington was 4 out of 7 on the penalty kill going into last night's game. They're now 5 out of 9 because the Lightning went 1 for 2. So they're barely over 50%. They're not going to finish the season with a penalty kill percentage of 55% or whatever. But things can get skewed early in the season on the percentages. So I actually don't remember exactly what the Lightning's PK percentage was at the beginning of last year. It's possible. We could go back and look. It's possible they gave up some goals in some games early in the year on the penalty kill that affected their percentage. They got it straightened out. It can happen, right? Sometimes it's a little bit of bad luck. Sometimes it's kind of getting adjusted to the beginning of a season. I think I asked Malone this question, like, does one special teams unit have an advantage early in the season? And he was kind of non-committal because I think it depends on the team. But from what I've seen, a lot of times the power play unit may have an advantage because skill is skill and penalty killing is about being in sync, right? And sometimes you're not quite in sync at the start of the year and you get more into a groove and a rhythm. Of course, there are some teams like Washington that before yesterday had been 0 for 8 on the power play. So they had had a slow start in the power play. I
think also to that point, in a bigger way, you do see offenses, I think, ahead of defenses early on in the season.
Yeah.
That's a general comment, but I think it plays out. Defensively, you get more in sync as things progress. So, I mean, my answer to that, I don't know if I've seen anything differently. I would just say, if you think they are struggling to any degree, are they winning faceoffs?
Yeah, well, this year they haven't. I mean, they were
so,
12 out of 13 going into last night's game. They went 2 for 3. So 14 out of 16 is excellent.
Yeah. So, Continue to win some faceoffs. Obviously, you don't want to take the penalties. Continue to win faceoffs. That's going to cut down on the looks the other team is going to have. If you want to start getting into scheme and things like that, I think I haven't seen anything that is jumping out from that perspective. Jim from Jacksonville says, which assistant coach is now responsible for coaching faceoffs? Was it Jeff Blashill recently and now has since changed? Isn't it Halpern?
Yeah, it's always been Halpern because he was a face-off guy in his career. Look, this is going to get a lot of attention based on what happened in the first 3 games, especially in the Boston game. They had a bad game. I still maintain that they're going to have to figure out how to account for the Glendening absence in this one specific category. But they hung in there yesterday. I mean, yesterday the faceoffs were 30-26 Washington. Although the Lightning struggled on penalty kill faceoffs. Caps went 4-1 on power play faceoffs. So we'll see if it continues. The coach can help. But ultimately, I mean, we've talked about this. If you are on your weak side, you have a disadvantage against a faceoff guy in a strong side. It's just the fact of the matter. Patrice Bergeron, we referenced him yesterday. One of the best faceoff guys in the NHL. As much as he could be unbeatable, understanding that the very best faceoff guys are usually in that 60% category. So even Bergeron was losing 4 out of every 10. Okay? He was as close to unbeatable when he was on his strong side. He was far more beatable when he was on his weak side. He was still very, very good, but you just cannot get the same leverage. So either the Lightning have to incorporate a right-handed faceoff guy when they have these D-zone draws to the right of the goalie, or they're going to have to rely on their lefties to navigate around that. Now, Sidney Crosby is a good example of somebody who can win faceoffs on his weak side because he wins them on his forehand. So he doesn't have to worry about leverage.
Right.
The fans are like, what is he talking about? When you're on your strong side, the linesman is not next to the shaft of your stick. He's next to the blade of your stick. So most players win faceoffs by pulling the blade back, which means the shaft is going forward. If the linesman is not in the way, you can really get a lot of leverage by pulling your stick back. Right. But when you're on your weak side, the linesman is in the path of the shaft of the stick, which is trying to go forward. The linesman, it's not the linesman's responsibility to get out of the way, right? So if you are on your weak side and you're taking on a guy on his strong side, that guy will have more leverage because the linesman is not in the way of what he is trying to do. Now, Phil would win some faceoffs this way, and Crosby notably does. He's not the only one. But if you win them on your forehand, the shaft of your stick is not going forward. You're sweeping your blade through the dot and kind of angling the stick.
Right.
But it takes you really have to have great anticipation because you can just think about it. It's going to take that player a little bit longer to get the stick to the dot, right? So a guy like Crosby has great anticipation, is quick, and he can sweep the stick through. A lot of players can't do that. Then you have a guy like Claude Giroux, and he might be the first one to have introduced this. We see other players do it. He just turns his stick around. So if he wants to, he always has the blade of his stick next to the linesman. He's a righty, but he basically will take a faceoff as a lefty, and that is hard to do because it's kind of like writing, if you're right-handed like me, trying to write left-handed. It's just different. Yeah, and a lot of guys can't do it.
That's a lot of practice, right? I mean, that would take some practice.
I mean, Belmar talked about it because Belmar was like, when I was in Philly, Giroux, Belmar tried to do it. He's like, you really have to have a lot of strength basically in your weaker hand as a result, and not everyone can do it. So look, if you're on your weak side, you are at a disadvantage. That is not coaching. That is just the makeup of the team right now, and some guys are just naturally gifted. Luke Glendening is a naturally gifted faceoff guy. Now, granted, the Lightning often didn't put him on his weak side, but when they had a faceoff in the defensive zone to the right of the goalie, Glendening was going out there. He didn't win all of them, but He didn't usually lose them clean, right? They were at least contested.
Yeah.
Because this was a tremendous skill of his.
And then you get into the line mates. How much are they helping?
Yes, the 50-50s,
battles,
we've talked
which are a
about
big
that.
deal.
The forwards have to come in. But keep in mind that, like, you know, when you're shorthanded, you have one fewer guy on the ice. Now, usually the players around the circle, they're even if you're shorthanded, because the power play team will have 2 defensemen back. But still.
I get it.
Yeah.
This also came in from Boomer. He said, Gage Gonsalves is someone I've been high on since his first call-up in 23-24. Over the offseason, I wrote about Gonzo and compared him to Cooch. Now, please don't misunderstand me. I'm not saying he will be Cooch, but I do think there is plenty of similarities worth noting, namely their work ethic and vision. Gonzo sees the ice so well and orchestrates plays in a similar way as Cooch. I'd love to see him reach 100 assists and win back-to-back Arts trophies, but I'll just say I definitely think he could be a point-per-game player. Am I too high on Gonsalves, and where do you see him progressing to? Thanks for the show.
Well, Boomer, he has a lot of skill, and he does see the ice well, and he's an excellent passer. I mean, there was a reason why he led Syracuse in scoring a couple of years ago, mostly with assists. I mean, he did lead Syracuse in scoring, but if you look at his goal-assist breakdown, he had way more assists than goals. As far as what he will produce or will be able to produce with the Lightning, if you are not on the first power play unit, you are going to have a harder time racking up lots of points. You just are. And Gonsalves is not on the top power play unit. Kucherov is, right? And Kucherov gets a lot of points through what the Lightning are doing on the power play. He had another point last night on the power play. So just in terms of, like, what is Gonsalves' ceiling for points, like, the ceiling may be higher than what he's actually able to get to just based on opportunity. If Gonsalves was seeing regular time on the top power play unit, he would have more opportunities to get points. But I'm not going to disagree that, you know, he has good vision and he's a skilled player. And he plays hard. I think that second line, if we're going to call it that, like, they had a couple of good games on the road trip.
You know, I'd have to go back and read Boomer's full question again, but Gonsalves and Kucherov, I understand some of the similarities. Kucherov's a better shooter, better goal scorer. Gonsalves is not.
And nobody in the league has Kucherov's vision. Nobody.
Correct. Gonsalves,
so, I
think
it probably was an unfair comparison, but I understand what he was trying to say, that
he's a skilled
Gonsalves
player.
has good vision. Yeah.
He's a skilled player who can play with other skilled players. I think his playmaking ability is his best asset. I don't think it's anywhere close to Kucherov's, and I don't think he's the same shooter as Kuch. That doesn't mean he can't be a productive player. Now, you got into some numbers there, Boom, about 100 assists. Man, there's a lot of things there. Let's concentrate on getting the 50 assists first. You know, let's get a full year at the NHL level where he's a regular contributor in the top 6, and let's see what those numbers look like. We talked about it last year. He was their most improved player, I would think, took the biggest steps, whatever you want to say. And I think the Lightning rewarded him to a degree by basically saying, you're going to be in top 6 role for this team to start the season. I don't think he's done anything to take him off that opportunity, but I also want to see some more, you know, and I think that's fair. And I think he would probably say that. You talk to Chief, and Chief flat out, you know, said before the season started, as we got into the first regular season game, that, you know, a guy like Gonsalves, his job should not be secured. That he should be looking at it and saying, I'm getting an opportunity, but by no means am I going to be cemented as a second-line winger. And I think that's fair. The good news is there's competition everywhere. And if he's not going to do it, somebody else will. Ideally, we'd like to see Gonsalves do it. But let's hold off on the comparison, I think, to Cooch, at least at this point for me. George, this was from yesterday, partner, as the questions did come in as people were understanding that we were taping. He says, why is there so much hate on Littleberg? I understand he makes mistakes, but he's a young defenseman, and his play has improved. What are y'all's thoughts on this?
Well, I tend not to swim in those waters where they're, I guess apparently our comments, anti-Littleberg comments. So I don't really have a point of reference. Maybe you do, Greg. I don't disagree with George. He's a young defenseman who is, growing his game. He is tough, certainly. With toughness, he does take some penalties. I was not crazy about the penalty that he got called for in the third period, which led to the tying goal, because Ryan Leonard cross-checked him back, and there were other cross-checks that were not called against Washington. But kind of comes with the territory. If you're going to play that way, you're probably going to get called for more minor penalties than some other players. So I think he's in the mix of the top 7. I would not say that his spot is absolutely secure in that. I mean, right now Crozier's hurt, so if he's going to be out for any period of time, the Lightning are at 6, and we'll see if they end up calling somebody up from the minors. But when they have 7, do I think it's like impossible that Lilleberg, wouldn't be potentially healthy scratched? I mean, it happened a little bit last year. It's possible. So I think he's a young defenseman who's continuing to grow and develop, and the Lightning are very, very high on him. I don't know if you heard any of these comments that George referenced.
I don't spend a ton of time on social media for various reasons. I can understand why with Lilleberg, because physical player may get himself out of position, and at times I think we've seen him not always make the right decisions with the puck in his own end when he's pressured. I think a lot of that is just a young defenseman adjusting to the speed of the game. I'd like him. I think there's value in terms of what he brings to this team. He is physical. He is somebody who can stick up for teammates. We can have conversations if you think he's a top 4 defenseman in terms of ceiling, or if he is more of a bottom pairing defenseman. That's fine. I think he is an NHL defenseman. I think he deserves to be up here. And I think you take the good with the bad with Lilleberg. I think the thinking was a lot of us wanted to see how he would play with Crozier if they got that opportunity. I think the way the season has gone, 1, health often dictates what's going to happen. And 2, how people are playing. And that doesn't always happen. We've seen mixing and matching too. So I do think it's a situation where for Lilleberg, I think there is upside there. I like what he can do, and I want to see more of it. But like any young player, he's making some mistakes, and because of that, you may see his ice time suffer a bit compared to some of the others. Matt says one of the most positive. I'm gonna rephrase that because that didn't make sense. Maybe one of the biggest positives was JoJo. He played great. This was from yesterday. All our newer guys and rookies are looking solid, but my worry is Cooch and Point. They are in a slump right now. Really hoping they can snap out of it.
So of the two, I thought Point had more of a Braden Point type of game yesterday. Kucherov is still not quite where he probably wants to be.
Yeah.
To this point this year. The line, as a line, was actually buzzing in the first period. I saw Joe Beninati after the first period, the longtime Caps TV announcer. Even though it was an ESPN broadcast, the Caps did a side-by-side because I think ESPN has taken a lot of their games this year. So National and TNT. So National can only have exclusive, I think, up to 13. Anything above that, the local regional can do them. Anyway, that's some inside baseball. Joe was doing the game. I saw him in the hallway after the first period. He's like, boy, that top line is buzzing. And he was right. Like, they were buzzing around. They had some looks. They did. And Point was really skating. And Kucherov was finding areas. Like, they both had a little fire in their belly, I think, because they are aware that, it hasn't really started the way that they would like the season after the first period of the first game, maybe. And it didn't quite continue that way. Now, some of that might have been the Caps push back in the second and the third. I didn't notice them quite as much kind of being able to dictate things as much. But, Point did score in the power play in the third period. So I'm not going to disagree with the statement. I mean, for Kucherov to be -8 through 4 games is not where he wants to be. And that's unfamiliar territory for him. So I'm sure he's not thrilled about that.
Makes a lot of
and
sense.
they are going to
Yeah.
need more from, like, if the Lightning are going to go where they want to go, they're going to need more from their top two offensive players for sure.
I think they'll eventually get going. Again,
Yeah.
track record indicates they will. Would you rather have this happen now than in later in the year, middle of the year? Of course. I don't know what else to tell you other than we've seen some mistakes that have bit them, and I'd like to see a little bit more of a shoot-first mentality, but I think the chances are going to come, and eventually, again, they're going to produce, and this will probably be a non-issue.
Point did set up Kucherov, as I say that. I remember in the second period, Point set up Kucherov. Thompson made a really good save. It was a 2-on-1. That was one of those odd mans.
You're right.
And Kucherov was on his strong side, so you would think he wouldn't be able to one-time the puck, but he let it go across his body, and he snapped it to the net, so it was a one-time.
I think that was
Thompson got over.
Was that in the second period?
It was
then
in the second period.
Then Hagel
yeah.
had another good chance right after that coming down the right side. I remember I just made a note of that just because it felt like there was, maybe a little momentum building for the Lightning. Anthony says, I have some concerns about the connection between Vasi and the team. Even in his interview, he says that he doesn't care how they play. It's not his job. You need connection when you defend your crease. So many goals from weak side tap-ins. D pinches needs to be cut.
Well, look, the D pinches have hurt them. And it did hurt them in the Boston game because Chernak pinched. They had, I think it was Chernak again, actually, pinched yesterday, and the Caps got an odd man rush out of it. I didn't actually hear that comment, Anthony. I mean, I don't know if it was taken out of context. I think Vasilevsky does care how the team plays. So I'm not quite sure exactly where that statement fit in the context of some bigger picture. All I can tell you is that statement on its own is not true. Like, Vasilevsky cares how the team plays in front of him, for sure. He is not interested in having to face 55 shots and 25 scoring chances, right? Like, when the team plays well in front of him, he is the first to say it. The backdoor tap-ins, so Chychrun scored in a backdoor tap-in. Yes. That's not Vasilevsky's responsibility on that particular play because it did not come through the blue paint. It actually got through Cirelli and almost deflected off Cirelli and came right to Chychrun, and he almost missed it. Hit off the heel of his stick. That was more on the coverage in front of Vasilevsky. So are there other backdoor tap-ins that I'm not remembering? What I remember this year more than anything else is Vasilevsky making a save and then an opposing player being in a dangerous area to jam in the rebound. That's what I've seen a few times. And again, that is on the guys in front of Vasilevsky to clear out the crease area, which the Lightning did a good job of yesterday. Like, there were plays around the net where the puck was loose and the Lightning were boxing out. They were getting pucks away from dangerous areas. That was one reason, one of many, why I felt that they played pretty well defensively yesterday.
Don't reason Vasi's lack of acknowledging maybe some issues or communication problems publicly as if he's not addressing it internally. I don't think it's really in anybody's best interest to come out and say, well, my defenders aren't doing what they're supposed to do in front of me.
Did he actually
say
that?
I'm saying it. Like,
if
the perception is that, when he's doing these interviews, and let me go back and read it, Anthony, because I just want to make sure. The connection between Vasi and the team, even in his interview, he says that he doesn't care how they play. It's not his job. I'm sure he does care how they play. But he's not going to say anything, I don't think, publicly. And don't take the fact that he doesn't say anything publicly as if he's not addressing it internally. Like, if there's an issue in and around the net, everybody can see what the problem is. You're probably not going to blame the goaltender. You may say, look, they're not clearing the crease. Vasi knows that. And if he's asked that in an interview, what do you think is the most professional way to handle that? It's probably to say, look, and that might be the message. The fact that he doesn't say, I can't worry about them, I have to worry about me. That also could be his way of saying, look, they got to get better. There are different ways to say something without actually coming out and saying it. One, if you believe there is, and he says, a connection between Vasi and the team. And look, I think some of this stems from defending in your crease. Okay. So that is being addressed, you would think. Film sessions internally, when they are on the ice in practice. Yes, of course. I wouldn't read too much into it if he's just not publicly coming out and saying what you want to say or what you want to hear. That's how I would interpret it. Because I think anybody who watches the games can say, look, Lightning got to be a little bit better in front of their net. You know, sure, the goaltender can help out in certain instances, but I think there's been a lot of traffic at times buzzing around the goaltenders, and ideally you'd like for that not to happen. And if Vasi's asked that question, if he's down on the play in front of him, he could address it a couple of ways. One, the way he's doing it and saying, look, I just got to worry about my job and take care of it. I'm really not worried about what's going on. Okay. To me, I interpret that away and take it for what it is. Or he just comes out and says, look, we've got to be a lot better in front of me. He's not taking that route publicly. I mean, that's how I interpret a partner. And, that's always a fishy thing to do when you're trying to get inside an athlete's head or anybody's head, really, because God forbid somebody try to get in my head. I don't know what they would find. Probably not a lot. Dustin says, terrible officiating didn't lead to a collapse of a game from the Lightning. However, Vasi going to sleep and not checking his spots in front of the net ties the game. Hedman laying a lazy pass to Gensel rather than going hard and out on the PK leads to a goal. Finally, Cirelli in absolute la-la land for the OT winner culminates in a 3-point total from the back-to-back. Technically, that's a win. I will add the first and last goal can be stopped by both Cirelli and Moser stacking their skates boot to toe with the stick blade in front, taking away the passing lane. So Dustin getting a little technical.
Yeah. So what you have done, Dustin, is you have targeted with laser-like precision the three
I like that.
Goals against.
Targeted.
Yes. So look, everything he said is accurate. Like Vasilevsky lost track of where the puck was, and also Hedman let Protas kind of get to an area. I mean, Hedman bears some responsibility there, maybe a little bit too. Hedman didn't get the puck out on the penalty kill. We talked about that. And Cirelli, in retrospect, Cirelli has to take Chychrun. Don't worry about the puck. Tie up Chychrun. Or if you're going to worry about the puck, do not let the puck get past you. Neither of those happened. That is why the Lightning allowed 3 goals. What I tried to advance at the beginning of the show is understanding that these 3 plays did happen. The body of the Lightning's work defensively was so much better than what we had seen in the earlier 3 games. I will include the Boston game. I thought they were better defensively last night than they were on Monday afternoon. But hockey is a game of mistakes. The Capitals made mistakes too. How did Point and Kucherov get a 2-on-1? Right?
Yeah. Sure.
Who didn't tie a Point stick on the Point power play goal?
Mm-hmm.
Who lost coverage on Gensel on the faceoff win by the Lightning?
Sure.
The Capitals.
Yeah.
So anytime there was not anytime there was a goal, but often when there was a goal against, you can look to like, how did this happen? So yeah, Dustin, the things that you pointed out were mistakes the Lightning made. But over the course of a 60-minute game plus 119 of overtime against a very good opponent, the Lightning, I thought, checked a lot of boxes defensively. That's why you heard the comments you heard coming out of the game.
Right.
I mean, look, when the Lightning play badly, we usually hear it from Coop. We hear it from the players. We didn't really hear that yesterday.
He was encouraged, wasn't he?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, again, I'm not saying that what you pointed out in your post was untrue. What I'm saying is that you chose to focus on the parts that hurt them rather than a lot of the things they did well that helped them get a road point in the second half of a back-to-back while dealing with a somewhat shortened bench against an excellent opponent.
Yeah.
I mean, that's kind of how we're looking at it.
I think, you know what the biggest challenge is, I think, for everybody who's not a player or coach or general manager, is that you need to take the macro view when you're looking at specific games. Hard to do. 82-game season, I think you and I have done as best we can since we've been doing shows together to not overreact when somebody makes a mistake or the team loses 3 in a row. There are times to point out flaws, and we will do that. But I think Brian Engblom talks about this all the time. There's many turnovers in a game by both teams because the game is so fast today. The question just becomes, is a turnover in the neutral zone less egregious than one in your own zone? Not every turnover is created equal. And so I think sometimes there needs to be a little bit more grace when you are looking at games and how the team is playing. You cannot play a 60-minute game and play it flawlessly. Heck, you might even say 50 minutes is hard to do. Things happen fast. The other team has a say. There are going to be some mistakes. You have to take that and be able to process it over a 82-game season as well and say, look, some of this is just going to happen because that's the nature of the game. You just pointed out the Capitals are making those mistakes too. Every team is making those mistakes. There's a lot of parity in today's game.
This was a well-defended game by both teams.
That's what I mean. Like Washington, we were just talking about how good they are defensively, and you probably can point out how many instances where maybe they had some breakdowns or didn't do the things correctly to win. That's what I mean. It's a hard game to be perfect. Happens very rarely. You need a lot of things to go well. Oh, by the way, the officiating probably needs to line up, and that doesn't happen either.
He started the post with that. And look, I think if you are a Lightning fan, you have a legitimate beef about the disparity of the calls in the first 4 games. It hasn't been a huge disparity, but there has been a disparity. The Lightning have been shorthanded, 16 times, and they've been on the power play 10 times. Now, in some of those earlier games, they didn't have the puck a lot. You might say, all right, well, if you don't have the puck, you're not going to draw penalties.
Right.
But a couple of those power plays they've gotten have been automatic. Puck over the glass. That happened in the Jersey game. So I am seeing plays that could be called on the other team not getting called. And what's frustrating, if you're basically pro-Lightning, is the Lightning seem to be getting called for similar type plays. But again, it's a little bit in a gray area, and it'll probably just even itself out over time. But I think I can look, certainly in the 2 games they played on the road, they were called for penalties that the other team committed the same type of play, and they weren't called. But that's the way it goes.
And that's fair.
And on the road, I know it's probably a cliche to say this, and maybe it's not true, but it's been said for so many years that there probably is some truth to it. Like, it's hard to get the breaks on the road. Like, things often work against you on the road.
Yeah.
Yes, occasionally you win a road game 5-0. But, usually there's some adversity. And sometimes that includes, not getting the benefit of calls.
Sometimes that does happen with the officiating. Look, to be fair, and I know our audience listens to every word, and we appreciate that. When you go into a game, the officiating is going to be what it's going to be. It really is. And I think you and I have talked about this, which I do think it's a fascinating discussion once the playoffs do start. There is not another league that has different guidelines and calls from the regular season to the postseason than the NHL.
I will point out, Greg, the league in the broadcast meetings made a point to show that there were actually more power plays issued last year in the playoffs than there were in the regular season on average per game.
Oh, first time in 50 years.
That runs contrary to your point.
First time in how many years?
I will add a very important caveat to that.
Please do.
I believe that in the playoffs, the way the game is played, they could probably call even more penalties.
It's a fair point.
So I think that
we're putting the whistle away.
More infractions are committed in the playoffs just because players understand that less is going to be called. So there may be more actual power plays, but the ratio of infractions called, nobody's tracking this, right? But I wonder if the ratio of infractions called is actually lower
Who pointed
in the
that out?
playoffs.
Who pointed that out?
The league. Yeah, they had
Not a surprise. No, you know
they
why
had
the
the
league
data,
pointed out? Because
right.
they've been hearing that for so many years. That like,
Yeah.
hey, you know, things change.
Look,
Playoff
there are actually
hockey's
more
different.
power plays. And I mean, you don't want a game filled with, 12 power plays apiece. You don't. And we understand in the playoffs, players are going to really dig in more and battle more. And yeah, there may be more infractions committed based on the intensity of the game.
Let's get to one more question. My neighbor, Lucas, who, by the way, saw me walking early in the morning yesterday with my weighted vest on. I was surprised he didn't put that on. In the
Did he yell a question at you
No,
across the street?
He was walking his dog, and he was with his wife, and they were just doing their thing, taking a little stroll. You can look at the start two ways. One, the team is regressing and we're in for a long year, or the Bolts have been competitive in 3 of the 4 games while their superstars have been playing their worst hockey in years. I'd bank Cooch, Hagel, and point rebound. I think you and I kind of...
Yeah, that's going to be an important part of where the Lightning are going to go or not go this year. I would take some encouragement out of the fact that they've gotten better defensively. I wouldn't say in every game because I think the first 2 were... I'm not sure that the second game was slightly better defensively than the first game. They both weren't great. But they were definitely better defensively in Game 3 than they were in the first 2, and they were better defensively in Game 4 than they were in Game 3. So, we will get into Detroit and Columbus tomorrow. Detroit plays tonight, actually, against the Panthers. They got hammered in their opener against Montreal, which has gotten off to a very good start. Then they rallied and honestly stunned Toronto in Detroit. I think they were down early 2-0. They ended up winning like 6-3. And then they absolutely stole a game in Toronto in their third game where they were outshot 40-15, but scored a goal in the last minute to win in regulation. So they are also trying to figure stuff out. I feel confident saying that they are not at the point where they are as buttoned up defensively as the Capitals were. Columbus, and I'm just basing this on last year, I haven't really paid too close attention to where they have been. I know the Devils just beat them in Columbus in a fairly low-scoring game. What Columbus did last year, a year in which they were in contention for a playoff spot but missed. They scored like crazy, but they gave up a lot of goals. So I don't know if they are going to be able to tighten things up defensively this year, but it kind of goes back to the same building block. The Lightning have to defend. If they can defend this weekend, they will get points.
Yep.
Because Detroit has not really shown that they are tight defensively. I mean, the one game they won 3-2, it sounded like it was a little bit of a goalie steal because the goalie made 38 saves. We'll see what happens tonight when they play the Panthers. And Columbus, based on what we saw last year, was kind of a run-and-gun type of team. So if you can defend against them, you should be able to get chances. I guess what I'm saying is, unlike the Washington game, where the Lightning didn't get a ton of chances, they got some, didn't get a lot. They should get some chances this weekend.
Sure.
But if they're going to trade chances, you know, there are no guarantees you're going to get points out of a game in which you trade chances. They have to defend better than the opposition. I know I sound like a broken record on this. We can get more into the Red Wings. Tomorrow we'll see how they do tonight against the Panthers.
It's a fair point by you, and we'll talk more about it tomorrow as well. By the way, enjoy some Refrum. Smooth, versatile, and now pouring at Benchmark International Arena. Order a Tropical Wave or a Lightning Mule and taste why fans are switching. Refrum is a premium craft Florida local rum built on authenticity, quality, easy drinkability. Ask for Refrum by name. Go Bolts. Enjoy responsibly. Partner, we'll be back at it again tomorrow.
Pre-taping again.
Pre-taping
as well. Departure day.
Yep. Yeah. Get those questions in at Bolts Radio. Great job by you as well. Steve Ersnick, thank you. Jared Johnston. I am Greg Linnelli. You've been listening to Power Lunch on Lightning Radio.